All right. So it's been 2 weeks since I last saw all of you, most of you. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing well on this Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Uh, Today we will be continuing the series. It's been a long one so far, but have shown a lot of important games from my 2023 tournament experiences. And a lot of it has culminated to today's games in the most important tournament that I've played in my career, which was the 2023 World Cup. And so those are the two games that we're going to look at. For those of you who don't know, the World Cup is probably, I would say, the third most important tournament there is in the chess world. Number one, obviously, being the World Championship. Number two being the candidates, and this one being the World Cup. So World Cup, the top three, first, second, and third place. I believe they're the ones who qualified to the candidates. So three spots. 128 players from around the world. There's a very kind of interesting and you know uh, laid out qualification process to the World Cup. Some are by rating, some are by like the world champion gets invite, the candidates players get some stuff like that. And of course, I got my spot through the Continental. So for those of you guys who were here in the first few lessons where I spent a lot of the time on the Continental Championship, my fourth place finish there qualified me to the World Cup. And so I traveled all the way to Baku last July. And this tournament, by the way, was actually right after US Juniors. So US Juniors concluded. Last week, we looked at a couple of unfortunate games from the US Juniors. And I flew immediately from the US Juniors to Baku, to the World Cup, and had maybe a day or two of rest in Azerbaijan. Baku is the capital city of Azerbaijan, to rest and, try to regenerate a little bit. In an ideal world, um, you should be traveling, like, if you can, if you have the resources as well as the time. If you're traveling across the world like that, you should in general take a few days before the tournament starts to get adjusted to the time zone, and just simply get enough rest before the tournament begins. Now, because US Juniors, which is a very important tournament that I could not miss, I was only able to arrive 1 or 2 days before. And I will say that in these first two games, I was kind of tired, but actually I was feeling quite good. Most of it actually was just the adrenaline rushing. The fact that I'm playing such a prestigious tournament was kind of taking over the any feelings of being tired, or my sleep schedule during this tournament was kind of crazy, just simply because I didn't adjust to the time zone. So I was waking up at like 5 a.m. and like going to sleep like really, really early. And it was totally okay. I mean, like I said, adrenaline rushing, the nerves kicking in, and the games were how the games were. Now, I received the pairings for the World Cup. I think it was early June, so I had around 1 month to prepare. And funnily enough, I got prepared against Mikhail Antipov. So some of you guys who play around the U.S. circuit probably should know him. He's a Russian grandmaster who goes to Mizzou, actually, my alumnus. And so we were teammates. And I know him quite well ever since I went to Mizzou. I'm now graduated, but ever since I went to Mizzou, I obviously know him very well. We'd have team trainings together. We actually played a lot against each other in the U.S. circuit. So in 2023, I played him 4, 5, maybe even 6 times just in the year of 2023. Both of us very, very active players. And so I had some very distinct battles against him. And obviously, we know each other's play styles quite well because we train together so often. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit unfortunate to have to travel so far just to play my teammate. And of course, if we're playing each other, it means that only one of us can advance to the next round. And so that was the unfortunate nature of it. But I was still very determined, very motivated. Um, and I came to play. I came to Baku, came to this match ready to play. Up until this point, we had played, I think, 3 or 4 games already in 2023, and even score, 4 draws. I was winning most of the games actually, and in those 3 or 4 draws, I was much better, if not completely winning in all of the games. And so I had yet to even get a worse position against him. And so that's why I was very confident in this pairing, and I was very confident in like this matchup. So those of you guys who don't know, it's a 2-game match. You get white, you get black, classical time control, 90 minutes plus 30-second increment with an additional 30 minutes added after move 40. And yeah, like I said before, we got the pairings in June. So you would think that for such an important tournament, I had plenty of time to prepare against someone I knew intimately well in terms of like how he plays, what openings he plays, his play style. And for whatever reason, and I've been talking about this throughout our talks through all these games, through these tournaments, I put hardly any preparation beforehand into this tournament. I mean, I was playing nonstop. I was playing basically every other weekend in norm tournaments. I played in the U.S. Juniors, and so I will say I was slightly burnt out at this point. And that kind of influenced the reason why I didn't put much preparation into this tournament. And so come me arriving into Baku, I had absolutely no opening preparation, at least specific to Antipov. And I also had no like external preparation. What I mean by that is when you play an important tournament like this, especially one that's knockout. So let's say I were to pass Antipov, then there's a new opponent, right? And so I can't necessarily prepare for that next opponent yet because maybe I don't even know who the next opponent will be. And so for a tournament like this, it's also good to do in general preparation. So basically just all the openings that you play, make sure you know your lines well, make sure you have specific ideas, special ideas. And so Antipov actually told me that he had spent like 3 or 4 weeks doing intensive opening preparation, not just for me, but also just for his in general openings. And we're going to talk about this for the second game. But this first game, I had the white pieces, and literally the night before the game, I still was not sure what move I was going to play on move 1 because I had played d4 against him. I think I'd also played e4 against him, and I think I even also had played c4 against him in some training games as well. And so literally the night before, I was like debating what to play. And like an hour or two before the game, I played c4, or I decided to play c4. So definitely was just not feeling great in terms of my opening preparation, but I was in form, playing very often, was feeling pretty good about my chess and just my in general calculation, intuition, and everything. And so, my thinking was that I'm just going to play c4, get a game from the opening, and then we'll play. And I also knew that my opponent's strategy, Antipov's strategy, because he respected me as a player, and even though he's 150 points higher rated than me, he would be okay with a draw with black. Generally, that's how it goes in these World Cups, is that even if you're 100, 150 points higher rated, you're okay with a draw with black because with the white pieces, you're hoping that you can strike. That's just generally what the match strategy is. And so knowing that, I thought c4 was also a safe option where if things quote unquote went wrong in the opening, that maybe I could just bow out and take a draw. Now, if you guys see at the top, I have lost this game. And we'll find out why. But one of the particular reasons was psychologically, as well as just preparation wise. In the opening, I had no idea what I was doing, and so you guys will see this very, very soon. And so we're not gonna, and we will see. We're gonna have a few stopping points in this game, but actually, we're gonna spend most of the time on the next game, which is after losing the first one, it was a must-win for me. So we'll look at that one, but this one, we'll take a quick look at where I went wrong, what I could have done better, and also how my opponent Antipov took advantage of my disadvantageous opening sequence. So against c4, my opponent went e5. So for those of you guys who either play the English, or obviously if you're black, you don't really have much of a choice if someone plays English against you. E5 is a very common response. So the main responses against c4, you can play c6, you can play e6, you can play c5, e5, and knight f6. I guess also g6. Those are the main moves. Many moves against the English. And very oftentimes c4 transposes into d4 structures. So for example, after c6, if I were to go d4, we're back in the Slav. If my opponent goes e6 and I go d4, we're back into like some QGD positions. And the very, very unique kind of just English positions are c5. Now it's a symmetrical English, and e5, which is what we call, I guess, I don't know if there's a specific name for this, but I usually just call it the reverse Sicilian. Basically, it's a Sicilian up a tempo pretty much. All right, so c4, e5, now I went knight c3, knight f6, and g3. So I had never played g3 up to this point. Usually I had played knight f3, which is another main move here. And so I played g3 basically for the first time. And like I said, I was just trying to get a game. I wanted to get out of the opening. I wanted to just play chess. My opponent hits me with bishop b4, which, as I found out later, was kind of his preparation. Once again, not necessarily just for me, but just his general preparation and his general opening knowledge. He wanted to play bishop b4 against me. And here, there's a lot of normal options. I can play bishop g2 and kind of play a reverse Rossolimo, actually, where now if black takes, maybe we can go either b takes or d takes, and it's literally just Rossolimo up a tempo. I could also go like queen c2. I can go queen b3, which is what I played. I think even knight d5 is a move, though I was not going to play this. It's not really a good move to play if you're out of preparation. Very easily, white could be in trouble in some structure like this if they're not careful. And once again, my opponent was prepared, so I didn't want to play this. And so I played. Oh, sorry, I played bishop g2, and then he actually played this h6 move. So this was the first move where I was completely out of preparation. And actually, I know Antipov very well, and I know that he loves these types of moves like h6, which basically gives your opponent a tempo, but says, do what you want with that tempo. I'm kind of hoping that you kind of make a weird move or a move that does not help you necessarily. And of course, the move h6 is always helpful. Once black castles his own back ranked mate, it also prevents a bishop from landing on g5. And so his kind of opening quote unquote like trick or delayed move, waiting move, actually worked out. And we'll see this very soon. So if someone's asking if h6 is a novelty, no, it's not. It's been played many times, but once again, I was not prepared for this line, and so I could not tell you during the game if it was a novelty or not. Um, let's see who's the highest rated to play this with black though. Oh, Carlsen's even played this with black. Okay. But you probably will see, yeah, Antipov against Stearman right there. All right, yeah, it's only move 4, so it's very unlikely that even though strange move like h6 is a novelty. So here, this is where things got strange. Queen b3. So you guys should know. Most of you guys are experts, some masters, and some FIDE masters and beyond. You're not supposed to bring your queen out too early. Now that being said, there are some variations or some positions where playing something like queen b3 is fine. And obviously I'm threatening the bishop, and so I'm basically claiming that if black takes on c3, I can even take it with the queen if I want to. And so my opponent plays a5. I go a3, fairly normal move. I'm just asking my opponent, do you want to take on c3 or do you not? He goes bishop back to c5. And so in my mind, I was like, this is actually kind of a win for me because black went bishop b4, bishop c5. The only move that black kind of really provokes me to play is queen b3. And if I really wanted to, I can always bring the queen back to c2. But once again, I was in that mentality of like, I just want to get to a random middle game or just a normal middle game, play solid, and just catch my opponent off guard. I could take on b7 here, but after, for example, it takes knight c6. Once again, I wasn't sure if my opponent was in preparation. I also just didn't really believe in this position at all. And okay, taking on b7 is not good. But instead, here I played queen b5. And it was very funny. Like, even though the move looks incredibly weird and very strange, I calculated it for about 10 minutes. And I actually kind of believed in the move. Now, I was sitting on my chair, played queen b5, and like multiple GMs were just, walking around. I mean, as one does. Like, it's a long time control. People walk around and play. And, obviously a lot of them they don't know me, but they know Antipov. And so maybe a couple of his friends or just some strong GMs were coming by. And it was the first round, so like Magnus, Naka, they were not playing yet, but some very strong GMs were walking by, and like my opponent thought for I think 20 minutes after queen b5, and my opponent and they were just like, what the heck could just happen? Like this guy just played queen b5 on move, what is it, like 6? Uh, and it's like I was actually thinking to myself, I was like, I kind of like this move, and I know it's very strange, but the thing is that if the bishop goes back to b6 or a5 or a7, obviously the e5 pawn hangs. All right, black can't go d6, and my main point here is that actually black can't go queen e7 either because now I take, and now black loses. So this is why I thought this was low-key genius, this queen b5 move, because he if he goes bishop b6, one of my ideas was actually to go like knight a4, for example, and or even c5 as another move, just a few options there. Oh, sorry, actually, sorry, the queen e5 move. So basically, the only move that I was considering was bishop d6 and bishop d4. Sorry. So these are the only two moves that I was considering. And honestly, those moves also look weird. So even though queen b5 is like incredibly strange, these moves, bishop d6 and bishop d4, also I thought were like, reasonable moves for me to provoke. Someone also is asking about knight a6, but now once again, I can take on b7. The computer is but now there's rook b8. So what was I planning here? Oh no, sorry. On knight a6, I was basically saying like, oh, the knight doesn't belong on a6. And so that's what I was claiming, and I can even take on a5. I think that was also my plan, to take on a5. So there were just very, very strange ideas behind this move, queen b5. And even though, like, strategically, this queen b5 move is like very strange and very weird, and you'll never see something like this almost ever in the opening, at least at master level play. I mean, you'll see it when the thousands play, but this queen b5 move is very strange. And so here he went bishop to d4. But this was my plan. I was like, okay, now I'll go knight f3, attacking the knight and the pawn, forcing black to either like play a move like castles or to take on c3. Now, if black takes on c3, my big idea here was after d takes c3, there's actually no way to defend this pawn comfortably. Because once again, there's no d6. Believe it or not, there's no d6 because my queen on b5. And for example, if knight c6, then I take on e5. And so now black's forced to play like a move like e4. And now at the very least, I could play queen e5 check. And on queen e7, I take on c7. There's some things that I calculated. And okay, if king f8, then this is very good for us. Okay, so and if c6, then actually I go queen back to b3. So on c6, queen back to b3. Now my queen b5 move. The whole point of it was that now I'm gonna get the bishop pair, and I won't concede anything in my structure. All right, so it's all about getting this bishop pair, but in a way that does not concede my structure. And then I'm basically just claiming that his moves are not useful. And so all this I had calculated. My opponent played castles. My intention was now takes 94. And now my big idea was that this queen, instead of going back to b3, is actually going to swing all the way over to h5. And so with my bishop pair, perhaps I could, swing the queen over to the queen side, and the king side, swing the queen over the king side, and maybe get some play. So this is what happened. d6, I played takes, d3, knight d7, and now queen h5. So I had actually calculated all the way up to this point, because I spent like 10 minutes, and when you make a move like queen b5, which is so strange and so weird, you kind of do have to put some calculation into it, and make sure that it's like a reasonable idea. Also, the variations, they work out for you. And so I calculated all the way up to this point, and my assessment, my evaluation, because anytime that you calculate a line, anytime that you're playing a candidate move, you want to make sure that you have an assessment ready, evaluation ready, because once you evaluate, then you're like, okay, then I'm confident to play this position, right? And so my evaluation of this position was unclear. Maybe I could get attack on the king. I have the bishop pair. The only kind of downside in my mind was the open e file. So as long as I was defending e2 with a queen on h5, or maybe like a bishop on f3 or rook on e1, I thought this was totally okay. All right, so I thought it was unclear, but I even thought that maybe here I was even a little bit better. That was what I was thinking in the game. But as it turns out, this position, even though it's like the best play or nearly the best play after queen b5, is not good for me. And so this will be the first stopping point. Okay, so this first stopping point is now black to play, and not necessarily black to play and find a win. It's not that bad. I mean, I'm not that bad of a player where I just calculate into a losing position. All right, but it's basically black to play and find a plan. Okay, find the idea here for black that is, and this is the main reason why this position is not so good for white, and it's the very subtle reason why moves like queen b5 should not be played, or moves like queen b5, even if you calculate it well, are generally not strategically sound. Okay, so basically here it's a first stopping point. We're gonna spend, let's say, 3 minutes. It's the main point of the position. 3 minutes to figure out why white's position is not ideal. So once again, for that, it can be words, it can be variations, calculations, whatever you see fit. And then after 3 minutes, we'll discuss the position, see some of your guys' ideas, and move on. Okay, so 3 minutes. Remember to send your messages privately in the chat, and then we'll proceed from there. Right. So let's start talking about the position. Let's first get some insight from Andrew J. Uh, yeah.
I wanted to play a4 because I saw that white had a lot of white square weaknesses on the queen side on b3. So I saw a4 to fix the queen side, and then I could bring my knight from c5 to b3, and then I could control the queen side using my knight, and he can't bring his rook to the c file. And then maybe I have like some c6, b5 to open up the c file.
Potentially. Yeah, but the main thing that a few people had noticed, had kind of seen, was that either black plays knight c5 immediately or simply plays a4 immediately, and basically the queen side is locked up, but mainly this square on b3 is a permanent weakness. And black can either just use that b3 square as a weakness to lock up the queen side, or at any point hop a knight into b3. Okay? So what I had missed, excuse me, what I had missed during the game when I calculated into this variation, into this position, was the fact that not only is my e2 square a weakness, and that one is manageable. Once again, like my queen on h5 defends it, I'll put a rook on e1 to defend it. At some point, maybe I'll go e3, and that was my main point. That was another way that I was going to try to maybe open up my dark square bishop, is to play e3 at the opportune moment. But other than that weakness, it's also the b3 square. So if my pawn was on a2, I actually think that this position would be fine, if not maybe even better for white. Just because then black would only have the weakness on e2 to target, and it would not be enough to justify giving up the bishop pair as well as this double pawn on d4. So let's now talk about the other idea that most people said, which was knight to e5. Okay, so knight e5 was the move that most people were attracted to, and a lot of people were saying, let's go knight e5 and then play bishop g4 and try to trap the queen. Now, my issue with the move knight e5, it's not a terrible move, but is, for example, let's say white just plays h3, stops your bishop g4 idea. First of all, you want to ask yourself, where does this knight belong? And I really think it belongs more so on c5 because of what we just mentioned, the b3 square. And not only that, the other weakness, the other pressure that we had was on the e file. And because the pressure on the e file, on the e2 pawn, was also is another important idea for black. What is this knight doing on e5? Just like, Sartak just said in the chat, So then on e5, even though it looks pretty and it created the threat of bishop g4, as long as white just kind of stops this threat of bishop g4 and makes sure the queen doesn't get trapped, then on e5 perhaps is not doing too much. So now someone's suggesting bishop f5. Okay, interesting move. But actually, here a very interesting idea that I think I saw was maybe g4. Okay, no, g4 doesn't work tactically, but maybe bishop f4 is a possibility. It is still a little bit uncomfortable, I would say. The queen is a little bit uncomfortable. I forgot exactly what I was going to try here. Yeah, maybe bishop f4 immediately is better. But for example, h3 and then the knight on e5 maybe is still not the best. But there is that bishop f5 move, which was kind of annoying. So yeah, bishop f4 here I think is probably what I was intending during the game, because now on bishop g4 there's bishop to e5. So tactically this works out. And once again, white's gonna, as long as there's no bishop g4, white will get castled next. So knight g6 is someone's mentioning, but once again, now the knight on g6 is even more farther offside. So let's say white goes bishop d2, right? What, are you gonna go back to e5? So the knight on g6 is a far cry from how strong it is on c5. And so if the best you have is to go back to e5, which I think it is, then okay, maybe white just goes back and go for f4 for the draw, Okay, let's go back to the game. All right, so that's the knight e5 move, and part of the reason why the knight doesn't really belong on e5. So here my opponent goes knight c5. Okay, now let's switch it back to the white side. I play bishop f4, just developing the bishop, also making sure that if he goes knight b3 now, maybe I have the d1 square for my rook. And now a4. And at this point, I soon realized, wow, b3 is just permanently locked down. There's also very even annoying moves like rook a5, which I completely did not consider, like, when I played queen b5 so long ago. And the position is just very, very annoying for me to handle. So I castled. Bishop f5 was played. I played rook d1, securing the d3 pawn if I ever wanted to move the e pawn. My opponent went rook a e8. If I was him, I probably would have played rook fe8 just to keep that, interesting idea of rook a5 open. But I think my opponent's intention was to double on the e-file anyways. And so I think in his mind, it probably didn't matter too much which rook he placed. Rook ae8. And now at this point, I actually think I started to play fairly well to get back into this game. I went bishop back to d2. A very unfortunate move, which clearly says that something went wrong somewhere along the line for white. If I went bishop f4, then back to d2. But I had a very clear plan in mind. My opponent went rook to e5, and now I went f4, which is the idea that my opponent missed after rook e7, and now I went g4. So now I'm actually trying to do something with my bishop pair, with my queen on h5, actually. And now black actually has to be quite careful. My opponent went bishop g6. I brought the queen back to h3. My opponent took on e2, which of course I saw. My idea is now to play f5, and now queen g3. The big threat is g5, and of course with taking, opening up the king side, and now the bishop on h7 is a very, very bad piece. So my opponent goes g5, which was not the only move, but it is definitely a very interesting one. I mean, now the point is if I were to en passant, takes, d3 is weak, the bishop is now activated, and so g5 is actually a pretty formidable move. So I took and now played queen h4. So this is going to be one of our final stopping points. So I did very well in the last few moves, actually, to shake things up, to create play for myself. And that's one of the things that you should try to do. When you're positionally worse and you want to find practical chances, looking for ways to improve the position, looking for ways to maybe create a pawn storm, or just, play prophylactically and then at some moments create counterplay. That is usually the way to go, especially to create yourself practical chances, as well as the fact that my opponent was actually starting to get low on time at this point. So queen h4, this is my intention. Very strong move. I'm now threatening rook f6. I'm now threatening bishop takes h6. And, even my bishop on g2 can come to d5. And, the position is actually quite scary now for black. All right. So this is going to be one of our final stopping points. All right. Black to play. And, find the best continuation. Okay. So find the best continuation. And we're going to take another 3 minutes here. Okay. So this will be the final stopping point for this game. And then we'll kind of breeze through the rest of the game, kind of show you guys how it ended, how it finished. But black to play here. And you need to be very careful. You need to realize what white's threats are, realize what white's strengths are in the position, and then proceed as you would. Okay, so black to play here, 3 minutes. Remember to send your answers privately, and we'll take our time here. And also remember, you are getting attacked here very, very heavily. And so one move answers are generally not going to be it. All right, I want a few moves. I want reasonings behind your moves, perhaps. And, definitely I want to see more than just one move in the variation. All right. So there's two main moves here. And most people had addressed these moves. Which were... Actually, there was only one kind of main move that was mostly said. A few people said f5, but f5 is way too excited. I mean, your opponent has, the bishop pair. Bishop d5 is now check. f5, bishop h6. I think you're in a lot of trouble, actually. So, and for example, after f5, bishop h6, you can't even play like rook e8, for example, because now I'll take on f5 with the rook. Not to mention like bishop d5 idea is also there. So for example, after rook f7, I even have bishop d5 here. Okay, so the main move that most people talked about was king g7. Now, the computer actually says objectively, king g7 is the best. I think I disagree with this from a practical sense, from a human sense. Now, king g7, a lot of people didn't even give me like variations here after king g7, if I'm not mistaken. Which once again is kind of like the whole reason what I said. Like, I mean, when you play move with king g7 and you stop the immediate threat of taking on h6 as well as rook f6, I mean, white either has nothing here and you're winning, let's say, or white has something here and is going to put pressure on you. So the move here is rook f3. Defending d3, because if you take, now there's takes, and bishop h6 ideas. And now white's idea is very simple. They're going to go rook h3 and then take on h6, and that becomes a check. Okay? And so the reason why here, I think practically this is hard to play for black. For example, the computer gives 96. Not this computer here. The computer in general gives 96. For example, rook h3, let's say, and then black goes like, I think it was, honestly, I kind of forgot what the computer was even giving. But basically, like, let white take on h6, something like that. And to me, that just doesn't seem very human. It seems a bit scary to me. And definitely to my opponent as well. So the move that my opponent played actually was rook takes d2. Now, I would give the mic to Sartok, who told everyone what his idea was. But everyone already knows what the idea was. All right. So rook takes d2 is actually a move that a lot of you should have considered. Okay, because when your opponent is attacking you, especially with such a major piece like the dark square bishop, and the dark squares are very weak around black's king, this rook takes d2 move is actually very, very key as a possibility, right? Just consider it as a candidate move. Now, you are sacrificing material, so that is one thing that you have to weigh. But after rook takes d2, there's a very, very powerful move, queen g5. And it's very important you play this move, because otherwise you're still getting attacked here. Rook f6 is still coming. Rook df2 is also coming. And queen g5 is actually the move that I had missed. Because now if I, let's say, go back to queen f2, now knight takes d3, and now black has 2 pawns for the exchange, so actually it's not even down material, and my attack is going nowhere. Okay, so Eric's mentioning h5 here. I think actually h5 was a move, but there was something I had here, like for example, I think rook f5 was very scary to me, and I think black here needs to also sacrifice something. Maybe play like rook. Yeah, rook f5 here like looked very scary to me. So once again, h5 computer gives us okay for black. Not as good as king g7, but h5 also computer gives. But to me, practically, this looks very, very scary. Okay, so practically, I think my opponent playing rook takes d2, especially because he was low on time. Especially because he was down to, I think, less than 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. Rook takes d2 is a very, very good move. Because now after it takes, queen g5, takes, his play becomes a lot easier. And during the game, I also misevaluated this position. Even though I'm up 1 unit in material, my position is actually very, very hard to play. Because I thought that if I get rook e1 in, and I also take the e file, and I get to my rook to e7, for example, king g7 was a play, rook e7, I completely forgot about c6. And as soon as he played c6, I realized here that, wow, actually, I'm like worse. Like it's like equal, but I'm like worse now. Because this knight on c5 is such a beast, such a powerhouse of a piece. I can't dislodge it. d3 is weak, so I played bishop e4. Or sorry, I played bishop f1. I realized after bishop e4, for example, let's say like take and d3, or something along these lines. Maybe even like king f6 first. Yeah, king f6, and then king e5, and now like king f4 and king e3. So some, or maybe not king, maybe at. Oh, d3, sorry, d3 here. And now this king comes in. So this is not ideal at all. So instead I played bishop f1, and I was at this point I realized that, wow, actually I'm not the one who's better here. And with low time on my opponent, it doesn't matter because he's going to get to move 40, and he's going to be totally fine. So I won't go too much into detail for the rest of the game because practically it's already very hard to play for white, and it was a very intricate endgame. My opponent just simply outplayed me, got his extra time, and converted. So basically at this point I decided to sacrifice the pawn on d3 because otherwise all my pieces just totally just totally like tangled up and I have no activity. So I sacrificed the pawn, which was actually the right idea. Played rook f5, so got some activity finally. But now black just starts chopping pawns, and actually, like, objectively the way I was playing was correct, but I needed to make so many only moves. It was just very, very difficult. So c5 was my losing move. I think I had to play like rook e4 it was, and I needed to get rid of this d pawn, which is what ended up losing me the game. But I thought after c5 here that like not only will I not even take the d7 pawn, the d4 pawn will still exist there, but the computer gives some random line. Like I think take on g5 and maybe the king's like getting perpetual or something like that. So c5 was the wrong decision, but to me it made some sense because now I thought I cleared the d file to get behind the pawn, but now he goes d3. And I'm just not in time. Now I have to go bring the rook back. Knight c4 happens. Now the pawn gets a d2, and I'm just way too passive. So I'll quickly show you guys how it happened. Black even takes on d6, puts the knight back on c4, goes b5, and I don't even need to show you guys the rest of the game. And I'm actually now down material, and my rooks are tied down to the d pawn. It's very clearly lost here. So a bit of an unfortunate sequence there. But what really set me back was that opening. Not only mentally, but also just in the position where I had to fight from behind. I had to find these f4, g4 ideas to put me back in the game. But then after this rook takes d2, very powerful kind of practical chance my opponent took. The position was practically speaking, from a human's perspective, very hard to defend, and very easy for him to play with his low time. So yeah, that was it from this game. All right, so now it's 0-1 in the match score. Oh, sorry, I did not mean to stop sharing the screen. So now it's 0-1 in the match score. I now have a must win with black against a 2600 player, which if my opponent knows all he needs is a draw, and if he ever has a chance to force a draw, he's going to force a draw. It's just practically very, very hard. I mean, my opponent will go for some solid opening. I'd never beaten him before. I did have one 2600. I did have one 2600 win with black, but it's because my opponent like wants to beat me. It was an open tournament, right? So like my opponent wanted to beat me, and like understandably, the circumstances are very, very different. So even for a 2700 player to win with black against a 2600 who just really, really wants to draw is also a hard task. I mean, these days opening preparation is just so kind of advanced these days that if you want to draw, you'll get a draw. All right. So I was very disappointed, obviously. Like losing with the white pieces is absolutely unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable in this World Cup format. Like it should never happen. Basically, if I offered my opponent a draw on move 5, like he would accept. So that kind of puts it in perspective. Like, I mean, I should never lose with white. And if we got into the rapid and blitz, where are the tiebreakers? Like, okay, I was probably an underdog because Antipov also is a very, very strong rapid and blitz player, but at least I would have a chance. Now I'm playing black pieces. I need to win, and my chances are very slim to none. But I'm a fighter. Resilient, and I didn't travel 15, I think actually it was like 20 hours, didn't travel 20 hours to Baku to go out without a fight, and I played one of the best games of my career in this game right here. Now, as you guys can see at the top, unfortunately I drew, and so I got bounced. I got kicked out of the World Cup, but I played one of the best strategical and positional outplays of my career, and probably honestly ever. Like this game, I was playing super quickly because I also wanted to put clock pressure on my opponent and it's also just my style, play intuitively. I was playing very quickly, and I was just like completely outplaying. And so I'll show you guys the critical moments. We'll stop on a couple of them. And then we're going to stop at the moment where I could have won this game. Okay. So I actually had a chance, a very, like when I give it to you guys as a puzzle, it will be a quote unquote easy chance. But in the game, I missed it, and it's kind of one of those moments that you just regret. It's a quote unquote, once you guys will see, quote unquote easy move to find when you're looking for it, and it would have been just so cool to win the game with black on demand and force a rapid and blitz tiebreaker, and then who knows what would happen, right? Who knows if I would have won the rapid and blitz tiebreaker and continue on to World Cup. But it is what it is. You grow, you experience, you learn from those mistakes. And overall, this World Cup was an amazing experience, and I'm hoping to play next time as well. Anyways, let's look at the game. So I decided to play the Sicilian. Not particularly rocket science why you would play the Sicilian instead of e4, e5 if you're trying to win. And so he goes knight f3. I go knight c6. So the nice thing about knight c6 these days is on d4 you have many possibilities. you can play knight f6, and then you can play e5, you can play e6 and d6, all three very respectable Sicilians. You can also here play e5. You can even play the dragon. There's just many, many options in the knight c6 Sicilians. The only downside of the knight c6 Sicilian these days is the Rossolimo. And I also knew, based on my opponent's playstyle, that if I played the Sicilian and the knight c6 Sicilian, Rossolimo was an absolute guarantee, especially because, he wants to draw the game. So knowing that the Rossolimo was a guarantee, I prepared this line. E6. I think these days, E6 Rossolimo is probably the best if you're looking to try to fight for an advantage. Like if you're playing a lower rated and they play the Rossolimo, in my opinion, E6 Rossolimo is very, very formidable. Castles, knight e7, rook e1, and then knight d4. So as luck would have it, my opponent extensively studied the Rossolimo before this tournament. Like I said, my opponent spent 3 or 4 weeks doing kind of like his own training camp for the World Cup. And he told me after the game, he had studied almost every Rossolimo line in E6 except this one. So I just was very fortunate. I chose a line that I chose a line that my opponent had not prepared for. And not only that, gives me very good practical chances. So already after knight d4, my opponent was out of preparation. I was in preparation still, and this was a great, great opportunity, great chance. So my opponent takes, goes c3, which makes sense. Basically, if I were to take and white goes d takes c3, this bishop's now active, and it's probably still fairly equal, but white's now the one who's better. So after c3, my preparation was a6. The bishop drops back. Now knight c6. So now the main point is that if white takes on d4, and I now take, white's pawn structure is slightly fractured, and black has actually very easy activity. The bishop can come out here. Black can even go b5, bishop b7, and black will actually have very good control of the d4 square. So here, the best move actually is b4, and it's the only move that white can play that fights for an advantage. Everything else is equal, and black actually has a position that is playable. So basically, I was taking sort of a risk. If white knew b4, I could still play this for a win, or I could just play this position. Like, this is far from like a forced draw. This is very far from, a completely equal position. I believe the ideas are like the bishop d6 or maybe bishop e7, and it's a fight. But white's better here. But instead he goes d3, which in my opinion was a very natural move. So I was prepared for this. I now play bishop c5. My opponent plays knight d2 to bring that to b3. I was also prepared for this with e5, knight b3, and now d6. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to absolutely control these dark squares. If white were to take, now black's very happy. For example, let's say white were to completely lock this up with c4. Black's idea would go to castles, at some point play f5, and black could even go b5. And with the space advantage and a closed position, white's bishop pair means absolutely nothing. So obviously white does not do this, instead takes on d4. Remember, white's trying to draw, right? And so already from the start, my opponent was in like, I need to draw mentality, because I surprised him in the opening. And with the white pieces, my opponent, who's higher rated, is just doing whatever it takes to simplify and to get into an equal position. So now I play knight takes d4, bishop to e3, and now queen b6. My point here is that, once again, if knight takes c5, I'm going to play d takes, secure the d4 square, and it's now this good bishop versus this bad bishop. And it's a very, pushable position for the black pieces. Here, my opponent played, what did he play? Here. Oh, yeah. So my opponent did indeed take and then take, but here I was very, very happy. Now, unfortunately, if I take this way, there was something here. I think, queen a4 is what I was worried about, because in general, I would want to take this way. But my main issue with this was that, I think it was queen a3 check, and then queen a4 check, and then queen a3. So I would want to play d4 because then it's symmetrical structure, and I'm just dominating in this bishop versus this bishop. But unfortunately, now I'm cut off from castling. This rook will come to c1. And it's just, very annoying position. And here it's around equal. So instead, I take a little bit of a chance, mix up the pawn structure, which is a very good idea. When you're trying to win, when you're in a must win, mixing up the pawn structure is generally your best bet. So my opponent goes rook c1. I can't take b2 because then c5 falls. I go bishop to e6. If I were to castle, then I would just kind of lose this pawn. And if I were to lose this pawn, or make this pawn or this pawn trade, mass liquidations would occur. So I go bishop e6 first. My opponent gives me a check, and then I go back to d7. My opponent goes a3, and now I go rook c8. Okay, so my opponent has pressure on c5, and my plan for the next few moves is, as long as I secure the c5 pawn, I will be much better. So as long as I get castled, secure the c5 pawn, I'll be just fine, right? Because as long as I secure that c5 pawn, then it will be this pawn structure versus this pawn structure, and with the light square bishops, these pawns will be a weakness, and I'll be better. So rook c2. All right, this is going to be our stopping point here. Actually, I'll give you guys one more move. Castles. I mean, you got to get castled. So I mentioned you got to get castled. And now rook ec1. Okay. So at this point, white is now threatening to take on c5. And we must defend this pawn. And by the way, I had actually seen this idea from Advance, but I am giving you guys this position here to find the idea. It's a very, very nice idea. And it was this kind of like way of playing is actually not really my style, but it's kind of the reasons why I say this game was one of my best games ever, is just because I was seeing these things so quickly, putting time pressure and also putting positional pressure on my opponent. And so we're going to take, okay, we're kind of losing out on time here. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes here. Okay, so 2 minutes. Very critical idea. I mean, remember to send them to me privately. You guys keep like being so enthusiastic and sending it to everyone. But once again, that kind of forfeits other people's idea to individually think. So please send your answers to me privately, especially if it's a good one. This previous example, they had the good idea of rook takes d2, and then now everyone knows. So please send them to me privately. Okay, 2 minutes here. Black to play. Okay, so if we had more time, I probably would have given this position to you guys like right here, because now actually you're faced with the option of whether you can castle or not. Because if you don't see the way to defend the c5 pawn, you just can't castle, right? Because if you castle and rook c1 just wins your c5 pawn on the spot, then okay, you just can't castle, And actually, in fact, I had seen this whole variation all the way from this point right here. Because once my opponent goes rook c1, it's very clear to me that I must defend this c5 pawn. Otherwise, if I'm not able to defend the c5 pawn, then I'm not going to have a better position. I mean, if I lose the c5 pawn, then likely once again some trades are going to happen. Maybe I'll take the b2 pawn instead. So a very good question is, why not bishop d7 here? And had some very I forgot exactly what the reasoning was, but it was a very smart reasoning. It was like a very smart reasoning, and I think it's because of queen h5. Yeah. So on bishop e6, if there's queen h5, rook c8 I can now play. But here, if I go bishop d7, queen h5, rook c8, now there's queen e5 check. So this is what I mean. I was seeing all this very, very rapidly. I think at this point I had an hour and maybe 15 minutes on my clock. And so I was just really in the mood of finding these little intricate ideas. And it also helps when you know one thing. One thing, I know that I need to defend the c5 pawn. And once I do that, then it's a whole nother game. All right. So from this point on right here, I calculated until the variation we're about to see. So bishop e6, queen a4, bishop d7, queen a3, rook c8, rook c2. Like I said, I would rather give it to you here because now you have a decision to make. But okay, castles, rook ec1. Now many people actually saw the first idea, which is queen h6. So many people gave queen d6, queen b4. I mean, queen b4, you lose the pawn here, right? And on queen d6, takes here, b6, you're not going to lose this position probably, but you're also not going to win. For example, rook takes c8 maybe. Oh, sorry, rook c7 actually. Rook c7 is a very nasty move, because now if you take this, you're down 2 pawns, and I don't think you have enough play to justify it. Anyways, so both queen b4 and queen d6 are not ideal. So the idea is queen h6. Many people saw this idea. If rook takes c5, we have a very creative queen takes c1. Take, and now it's only one pawn for the two rooks, and we're already very active, pinning the bishop. So to most people who got queen h6 very quickly, I countered with what if b3? Okay, so this is the critical move, because now c1's guarded, and well, what are you going to do now? We have one less defender on the c5 pawn. And so, Ashwin, you were the first one to not only find queen h6, but also the best continuation here.
Yes, so I think queen h6, b3, then queen d6 is actually a good move, because the pawn on b2 is not there anymore to defend the queen on a3 after b6. So I think this is actually a little poisoned pawn thing.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, not even just a poison pawn. It's completely untouchable. Rook c5, b6 wins the game. So a couple of people mentioned b6 here, which is actually the first move that I considered long, long ago. And now queen a6, and now we have ideas like queen c6, rook a8. And I mean, we have a very solid pawn structure here. And so I had a feeling that this had to be good. But once I saw queen d6, it was immediately clear to me that that this is good, right? I mean, white can never take on c5 now. And eventually we're going to play b6 at some opportune moment. We could also just leave this here. We could also double in the c file. We could also play rook e8, rook e5. We could also play f5. And so white's not touching this c5 pawn ever. Okay? So very, very creative play. And the thing is that when you have that one idea, we need to defend c5 pawn, and then it's a new game, and then we play. All of that surrounds, using creative ideas, using critical thinking, using logical reasoning, right? A lot of you had seen that queen d6, rook c5, b6 was an idea here. And so if you combine that with now this queen h6 and then queen d6 idea, everything clicks. And so my opponent after the game was kind of like praising my ideas here, because he just completely did not even see this. He thought that he was trading off and was going to draw the game very quickly. And it's also partially the reason why, he was like so terrified in this game and was going to draw at all costs, is because, at this point, queen h6, d3, queen d6, I'm not like much better here, but it's now a whole new game. You also have the surprise factor. I blitz this out because, like I said, I had seen this all the way from bishop e6. So I blitz queen h6 out, and my opponent's like, queen h6, what the heck? And then on b3, I blitz out queen d6, and then it was just like a wow moment for my opponent. So I'll show you guys how the game continues and how I proceeded to still outplay my opponent from that point on. So now my opponent played g3. I mean, my opponent's not going to win the c5 pawn anymore. So my opponent has to just simply improve the position. Now I go f5. Okay, so now the d3 pawn is going to be a significant weakness, and that's my hope. That's my goal in position. My opponent goes e5, because now after queen takes, there is rook c5, right? So here I go, here I did take, and now play queen back to d6. So now the only move, queen b4. White could go b4, but I forgot exactly the reason why. I think bishop c6, yeah, bishop c6 is very strong now. Now the diagonal I'm controlling, and now my idea is to play f4. And I'm just kind of crashing through here. So this is very scary. So my opponent plays queen b4, now threatening to make some trades. I now want bishop e6, preventing rook c4, or preventing, I think also the idea was this rook to c4. Because here still the queen is pinned. So white still needs to find some idea to unpin the queen. So bishop e6, a3, defending the queen now. I now want f4, bishop to e2, rook takes c5, queen takes, rook takes f3. So my opponent's no longer getting mated, but now after f3, my opponent's forced to go bishop to d1, and now bishop h3. So f3 is defended. I'm now coming in with rook e8, rook e1 mating ideas, and weakness, potential weakness, and this king is absolutely trapped. So only move that does not get mated here is b4. But basically playing bishop b3 and rook c1. So this is the only way not to get baited. White had to bring the rook back to c1, as well as clear out a way for the bishop to defend. So for example, if my opponent started with rook c1 here, now what I was going to play was, I think I'd now go what was it here? Sorry, kind of trying to recall what the plan was here. I think it was just g5 and g4, but I think also another point here is actually, like, for example, if I go g5 and now white goes b3, or so b4, my king now is not forced to go f8 when white gets the check. So now I can go like g7, and the bishop will have to move out eventually. The issue for white's position is that white is just trapped. This king is trapped. This rook has to maintain on the back rank. And so I'm just going to have infinite press. And so my opponent chose for b4. It's the best way forward. Rook e8, bishop b3 check, king f8, and now rook c1. Now the issue here is that because I'm not in time to play g5, g4, my opponent is going to come in with bishop d5 and takes. So my infinite bind here is no longer going to be infinite. The main problem here for white is that this rook's stuck, this king's stuck, this pawn's a weakness, this pawn's a menace. And even though I don't have an immediate winning plan, I just have a complete bind on the position. So this is our last stopping point. Black to play. 2 minutes. Last stopping point of the day. Black to play and finds the best continuation. All right. So most of you got it. I mean, I probably should have just stopped this point and not given you guys any hints. Because yeah, I probably should have stopped this point and not giving you any hints, because it seemed like almost everyone got it. Because I told you guys, like, bishop d5 is white's idea. So once you see bishop d5 is white's idea, the very simple rook e5 is just game over. And the point here is that, once again, black doesn't have any clear winning plans, but the issue is that none of white's pieces can move. There's no productive square for this bishop. This rook has to stay on the first rank. This king obviously can't move. And so black is very simply just going to slowly but surely improve the position. Go g5, go h5, at some point maybe even go g4, rook e2, rook d2, anytime black wants. Maybe even bring the king to d6, so bishop d5 is not a possibility. And so why I missed this move, I don't know. Part of me suspects that, I think this was like move, let me actually just check what move this was. Okay, so I was still hadn't made time control yet, actually. I had like 12 minutes here. So I was kind of low. I had, like, in that middle game stage after I defended c5 pawn, I had to think a little bit there just to put the most pressure. But I had enough time here, and it just rook e5 just didn't come to mind. And you know, even though prophylaxis should be and usually is the kind of instinct, right? Okay, my opponent has an idea of bishop d5. How do I stop that? And if I had just taken one more second to just think prophylactically, rook e5 would have come immediately to mind, you know? And, you know, for whatever reason, I just missed it. And, okay, the evaluation is not minus 1.74. If you put it on a strong computer, I think the evaluation here is like -4, -5. Because literally white doesn't have any moves. On a low engine, it's probably like -2, just because all the engine sees is that white can't move the pieces, but it doesn't understand how black will actually eventually win. On a stronger engine that has positional understanding, like, for example, Leela or Stockfish Nune, which has the neural networks, it will basically say this game's over. So unfortunately, instead of rook e5, I played bishop e6, because, like I said, bishop d5 was coming, and I'm going to lose all my pawns. And even though, like, let's say I can go g5 here and g4, so I still have this bind, right? But now I'm going to lose my pawns. So once again, I don't have a winning idea other than the fact that I have a complete bind and I have infinite time to improve my position. But if I'm down a pawn, then, you know, that's not really the case. And not only that, bishop can even not only that, but this bishop can even come back to e4. Right? So I thought that I had to play bishop e6, and this was another thing is that another thing that did me in is that I had seen b4 in advance. So I saw b4, and then bishop b3, and then rook c1, and this idea of bishop d5, and in my mind, I have to stop bishop d5, and in my mind, bishop e6 was my only move, right? So then takes, and here I thought I had good winning chances, and actually I kind of do, but my opponent, Russian grandmaster, with, you know, his endgame prowess, drew the game very, very easily. h4, it's now important that white gets h4 in, otherwise his king still will never enter the game. I went b5, locking up the queen side, g4, so now his king is entering. I played rook e2, and then rook d2 to win the d pawn, and now it's time to bring the king in. as well as try to advance the pawn. So now I'm able to cut the king off and advance the d pawn. So it's still not easy. I mean, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys would be quaking here with white because this d pawn's advancing and this king's also entering in. So white gave a check and tries to get behind, but now I'm kind of able to get like a Lucena type position where my king's in front of the pawn. So eventually I got something like this, where my king is in front of the pawn. But unfortunately, in these types of positions, what white needs to do is get counterplay. So what white is going to do is eliminate these pawns, and you know these pawns will be enough to draw the game. So actually, I almost lost this. I'll show you guys how the end finished. So rook e8 and rook d8, understanding that I need to like queen this pawn. Like it cannot just be a queen and then white takes it. I need to like queen it. So I get my rook behind the pawn, and then play d3. My opponent cuts my king off. I go king d1 and d2, king f1. So this was like the last and very important sequence my opponent needed to see. King g2, king f1, and then my king gets cut off. Because otherwise, if I go king d1 and then d2, and let's say white goes like h5 here, now I'll go king e2 and then king d3. And now I queen. So that would have been nice. But instead, my opponent played king f1. And actually, already at this point, black needs to be careful not to lose. And so, given the fact that I was still in a must-win mode, I didn't really want to concede the draw. And so I played rook d4. And now my opponent played f3 here. And I was like, shoot. At this point, I realized that I had absolutely no winning chances. And also at this point, I was around 2440, 2450 with 2 norms. So I was like, well, you know, rating is kind of important, right? And so I should just make a draw here. But actually, I'm already lost here. So this is what I did. I played rook c4, rook d7. And by the way, I'm lost here. And I played rook c7. So if white just like doesn't take my rook with stalemate, it's a loss. For example, if white goes like rook d5 here, I'm losing. But immediately my opponent takes on c7 because once again, like all he needs is a draw, and he doesn't want to take any risks. And so he doesn't want to take the time because he was sort of low on time to calculate, like for example, rook takes d2 or maybe rook d5, and after like king c2, sacrifice the rook here because maybe in some like world he loses this, you know. So you know it's very funny to save my 5 points of rating. I play rook c7, he takes it. You know, we shake hands, and unfortunately, I get knocked out of the World Cup. So funnily enough, if I wanted to actually draw it, like real draw it, I should have gone rook c8 here, because actually, if white does like not take my rook, there are winning chances, because now the pawns are not as advanced. So that was like a bit of a funny moment. Actually, another thing I can do here is rook f8. This is probably the easiest, because now for h5, I just take f2. So that's how I should have played, actually. I should have taken f2 here, and now it's a draw. So basically white could have won and how the game went. For example, like play, rook d5 here or rook d4. And my rook just cannot stop these 3 connected pass pawns. All right, well, tough finish, right? I played such a good positional middle game, defending that c5 pawn, and it slowly grinded him with like this rook and bishop ending. Unfortunately, missed rook e5. And that was the difference. That was the difference between me playing my immortal game that saved me from getting kicked out of the World Cup and just, a normal draw and me going home. So, yes, chess is brutal. But, hopefully this experience, you guys learned a thing or two about, well, first of all, should have put more preparation in. Should have not gone in cold and get cooked with white, right? That's obviously not an ideal start to the World Cup. And on top of that, just calm your nerves and understand that with the right preparation, with the right amount of confidence, anything can happen. Even though a win with black against a 2600 GM when all they need is a draw sounds impossible, with the right play, the right mindset, and as well as just the right amount of resilience, I almost did it. Okay. So, no, Antipov was not a student here. At U.S. Chess School? No. Antipov is like actually from Russia. Like he came here for school, to go to Mizzou, like the university. So no, he definitely was not he's probably a Russian schoolboy. Yes, that's why he was able to draw us endgame. No, he's never done a U.S. Chess School's camp. But on that note, good reminder, Ashwin. I'm going to be doing an in-person US Chess School camp, July 15th to 18th, I believe are the dates. So it's kind of last call, actually. The initial round of applications or initial round of applicants are coming up now, and it's gonna be in San Francisco. So I know some of you are kind of far from there, but the cost of the training camp is free, and it is a bit more selective than these online sessions. So unfortunately, even if you do get, like, even though you're here, it's not necessarily going to guarantee you entrance to the in-person camp, because the in-person camp, we can only allow like 10 to 12 players, or 10 to 12 campers. But if you're interested, please apply. And I hope to see some of you there. All right. So mark the dates, July 15th to 18th. And on top of that, there's also a camp July 22nd to 25th. I think there are the dates in New York. Okay. So if you're interested, apply, because first round of applications are coming relatively soon. And so this might be your last chance. All right. And most of you guys should have gotten an email as well, either yourself or your parents, about the camps. Okay. No, it's not that type of camp. It's, you have to find your own accommodation and whatnot, but it's just a training camp. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in today to the games. And we're going to continue this series in 2 weeks. I believe my next slot is in 2 weeks. So hope to see most of you guys there. See you there. And take care, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.